welcome to day 3 of our Coming Home to Yourself mini-series. And today we're going to be talking about the mirror of emotions. Emotions are a really beautiful aspect of this human experience, but they're also probably one of the areas that gets most misunderstood. Because when we are looking at emotions, oftentimes most of us view emotions as negative emotions or positive emotions, but they're all just emotions. And so when we really start to come home to ourselves, we give every emotion kind of equal standing room. We start to recognize that they're neither bad nor particularly good. They're just information. They've been given to us so that we can explore and we can understand and we can see and observe what it is that's happening inside us. And so I think we'll address kind of the negative side first, because that's the side that oftentimes we get most stuck. And so probably one of the biggest ones that people will come into clinic for is depression and anxiety. And I think probably agree that most people would not view being in depression or having anxiety as a positive. But what happens is that when we have these type of emotions, anger is another big one, that we avoid them. We try to stuff them down. We try to get rid of them instead of pausing and asking, what are you here to tell me today? Why have you come to me today? And this is the real crux of it when it comes to getting to know yourself and coming home in this way, is no longer going to the space of, I like this emotion and I don't like this emotion, or I want more of this emotion and I want to get rid of that emotion. That creates this polarizing effect. And a lot of us understand, because many of us have been raised in religions or philosophies that help us understand that there is opposition in all things. But then when it comes to real life application, that understanding oftentimes goes out the window. But truly, to be able to experience this peace and this inner knowing, we have to have that opposition to bump up against. And so if you can think of your emotions kind of like the weights that you lift when you go to the gym, we know when we're in exercise that there has to be a level of resistance. There has to be something to stretch those muscles or even tear the muscles a little bit in order for us to strengthen and in order for us to grow. And that's what emotions do for us. They present these opportunities for us to explore, for us to understand what's happening and what's arising in us. And so another analogy that I often will use when talking about emotions and them mirroring back to us what's happening in us is kind of the idea that if you were to have an arm that was just normal, had no wounds, nothing on it, and you poured salt over your arm, nothing would happen. You wouldn't feel anything. But if you have a cut that's open in your arm, then if you pour salt over it, it's going to sting. But the salt hasn't changed. And so often we've got a habit of blaming whatever was outside of us for causing the pain, where usually the pain or the emotion is reflecting us back to a wounding that's still unresolved. And I think it can be helpful at this point to kind of understand what happens with emotions. And so first big thing that can be helpful to recognize is that emotions are not yours. And so frequently I'll hear the vocabulary like I am sad, or I am angry, or I am happy. But you're actually not those things. And so a more accurate recognition would be sadness is arising, or I can feel anger bubbling up right now. I can feel a lot of happiness from this experience, or a lot of joy arising. But these emotions are just passing through us. They are not who we are. And so kind of that first space of coming home to yourself is the recognition that you're not these things. They are energy movements that are part of being human, that are coming and going all the time, but they are not us. And so then when something triggers one of these emotions to arise, one of these emotions to visit, we can now start to realize, what are you coming for? What are you trying to help me understand? And this kind of changes everything when you start to realize that these kind of aches and these wounds are coming from this space, right? So typically when we have an emotion arise and bubble up in us, we have two options. We can acknowledge it and hear what it's telling us and allow it to move through, or we can hang on to it. And if we hang on to it, our body will go into phase 2 of trying to help us release it, and we'll start to obsess over whatever was happening. So if it was a conversation, or maybe someone cut you off on the road, if we don't just allow it to move through, the mind will start obsessing over it. It'll replay it over and over and over again. And that's its way of saying, hey, this wasn't yours. Can you let it go? Can you release it? And if we don't let it go at that point, then we stuff it deeper. And that's when it becomes what's called an emotional toxin. Or in, I think it was yesterday's video, we talked about a piece being fragmented off. And that's how that's happened. Is now that piece that was in that experience that you didn't allow to clear has now gotten stuck in that space. And so now what will happen is anytime something else comes up that triggers a similar response, it is going to revert you back, and you're going to start having this kitchen sink effect. And this is why super rational, mature adults will all of a sudden hit one of these stuck, fragmented spaces, and you'll start acting like a 3-year-old or a 7-year-old because it's now fragmenting you back to this space. For example, I did a video last week where we were at baseball practice, and oh my gosh, it triggered some big emotions from when I was a teenager, and that's how I started acting, was like this irrational kind of emotional intense teenager for a moment. And then I was able to see that wounding that was stuck there and sit with it and give it space to clear through. And when this starts to happen, emotions really become magical, because they're these beautiful pointers that are pointing you back to these wounds that maybe you're still a little infected and you've just smacked a Band-Aid over it, and they're wanting to heal and clear through. So our bodies and our emotions are so beautiful, and one of the greatest gifts we have, if we can stop resisting them and avoiding them and really meeting them. So today, for your experience, we're going to give you the opportunity to sit down with one of your emotions. So if you can go ahead and close your eyes. Deep breath in all the way into the low belly. Taking a moment to just settle in. Connecting to your 5 senses. Noticing what you hear, what you taste, what you smell, and what you feel against your skin. Just allowing yourself space to settle in. And then as you settle into the space, I want you to invite forward whichever emotion bubbles up. Maybe one that you struggle or resist a little bit. As that emotion comes into view, could be joy, it could be sadness, anger, fear, frustration. I want you to take a moment to connect with it from a place of curiosity. What does it look like? If this emotion was a character, what would it look like? What is the energy of it? Does it feel dense? Does it feel light? Does it feel neutral? What does this emotion feel like? Can you ask the emotion, where does it show up in your body? When this emotion arises, where do you feel it? Does it bubble up in your throat, in your chest, in your tummy, in a tightening of your whole body? What does it feel like when this emotion shows up as a visitor in your body? And as you settle into that recognition, can you ask this emotion, what does it come to tell you? What is it usually trying to help you understand when it arises? What is it pointing you to? Encourage you to ask, is it here to upset you? Is it here to make your life harder? Or is it here for your growth and from a place of love? And can you ask this emotion to show you your habit of behavior with it? How do you typically respond when this emotion comes to visit? Up until now, what has been your conditioned response? And then can you ask this emotion what could be a more helpful response when it comes to visit? If you were engaging with this emotion from a space of consciousness and awareness, how then might you respond? And taking a deep breath in and acknowledging what it felt like to sit down and have an open dialogue with your emotion. Is it as uncomfortable as you thought it might be? take a moment to thank your emotion for communicating with you. To thank yourself for showing up in this space and in this way. For being committed and willing to learn more about your connection with yourself. And as we close out today's practice, if it feels good to continue to sit and meditate on this and sit in this, allow yourself space to do that. Always, it can be very helpful to journal after these experiences. It can often help you open and expand into the knowing that's being presented. The invitation today is to get curious. When emotions arise, can you just take a moment to pause and ask, what are you coming to show me? Thank you for coming to me out of love and for helping me to come home to myself. Wishing you an emotionally outrageous day. Sending lots of love.